Hello class, today we'll be doing your Excel 2021 in practice Chapter 10 Guided Project 10.3. To go ahead and get started, we want to download our start file and our resources file. They should be our file for ourselves and Courtyard Medical 10. Go ahead and open up your file. And make sure that it is a blank workbook. Okay, let's go to get started. Our first step is that we want to enable editing so we're able to work in the workbook. Our next step is that we want to be able to add our data from the other workbook into this workbook. So let's go ahead and go to our data tab, get data, and we want to press Launch Power Query Editor. From here, we should have a window pop up and it should say Power Query Editor and it should be empty. Next thing we want to do is that we want to import our data from the other worksheet. So let's go ahead and go to New Source in the New Query quadrant. Go to File, Excel Workbook. Go ahead and go to your Courtyard Medical 10. We should see that there are 4 files to select from. When previewing the 2021 data, we can see that there are IDs, insurance companies, service codes, the dates, maximum benefits, and the billing. So we want to go ahead and import our data 2021 first. So go ahead and select your data 2021, click OK. Once we selected our data, we want to go ahead and import our other data, which is our 2022. So go ahead and go to a New Source, File, Excel Workbook. Back to our downloads, go to Courtyard Medical 10. Click on Data 2022, press OK. We should now have both tables imported. Okay, when analyzing these tables, we want to see that in data 2021, we have IDs starting from 1 to 31. And in our data 2022, we should see we have the IDs from 32 to 60. Now we want to go ahead and combine these two tables as one. So let's go ahead and go to Append Queries. This will be in the Transform quadrant. The Combine quadrant, my bad. And we want to Append Queries. Append Queries as new. We should see a new window pop up and we want to select 2 tables. Our first table is data 2022. Our second data, first data should be 2021. Our second data is data 2022. Go ahead and press OK. We should see now a new query has opened and it should be called Append 1. We should see that it starts from ID 1 all the way down to ID 60. Okay, last thing we want to do before importing this data into our workbook is that we want to change the ID from OP to DS to represent dental services. To do this, we want to go to our Transform quadrant and press Replace Values. We want to find any values that have a capital O and P and replace it with capital D and S. Go ahead and press OK. We just see now that our IDs start with DS rather than OP now. Now we're going to import our data. So now let's go ahead and go to Close and Load. Click Close and Load again. We just see that our data has now been imported into our Excel workbook. Double check that these sheets are named correctly. If they are not, go ahead and rename accordingly. Moving on, we now want to insert a pivot table. So select cell A2 in your Append 1 sheet. Go to Table Design. Go to your Tools quadrant and click Summarize with Pivot Table. New worksheet, and go ahead and press OK. We now want to rename the sheet as Pivot Table. Now we're ready to begin. Okay, to get started, we want to go ahead and select our service code in the fields. It should be going to our rows option. And now we want to press build, which goes to our values. And we want a duplicate of build. So we should hold and drag build in our pivot table fields into our values area. And we should have a duplicate sum of build too. Now we want to edit these these fields to represent what we want. So sum of build, we want to select this one. We want to go to pivot table analyze, active field, field settings. Make sure that you selected row cell B3. Field settings, change the name to total build. Change the number format to currency with 0 decimal points. Okay. Go ahead and press OK again. Should change like this. And now for our sum build 2, we should change this one. Click on cell C3, field settings. Change it to average. Change this. Change the name to average build. Change the number format to currency with 0 decimals. Go ahead and press OK. Go ahead and press OK again. To see now we have the average of build. Next, we want to analyze on our pivot table is that our cell A7 displays a 120 rather than the correct formatting of all the rest. What we should first do is go to our append 1 sheets, scroll all the way down to cell C61, and we should edit this service code as D0120. Once we do this, we should go to our pivot table, but we should notice that our pivot table hasn't updated yet. To update our pivot table, we want to go ahead and click on the pivot table, go to pivot table analyze, go to the data quadrant, and click refresh. We should now see that it has reorganized accordingly to having a D0120 instead. Okay, moving on, we now want to select a style for our pivot table. So go ahead and click on your pivot table, go to design, go ahead and go to pivot table styles, click the expanded arrow on the bottom right. We want to select pivot light blue pivot style medium 6, which is going to be this one right here. Once we have that applied, we now want to select banded rows and banded columns, which will be in the pivot table style options quadrant. Go ahead and check these boxes. Now what we need to do is that we want to apply bold formatting to cell A3 through C3. Let's go ahead and go to home, press bold, or press Control B. Last thing we should do here is change the name to service code. Once we do that, we now want to autofit all the columns. So go ahead and select your 3 columns. And now in between any of your columns on the line, go ahead and double click, and we should now have the auto-fitted. Next thing we want to do is cell A1. We want to have Courtyard Medical Dental Services. I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this over. And in cell A2, we want to type out or copy billings by service code. Go ahead and highlight your cells A1 and A2 and change the font size to 14. Lastly, we need to right-click on row 3 and insert a new row. Moving on, we now want to create a pivot chart. So go ahead and select anywhere on your pivot table. Go to pivot table analyze and go to, that's interesting. Pivot table, analyze. Oh, and yes, and go to the tools quadrant and press pivot chart. Once we click on pivot chart, we should go to the combo category, select the first option and press OK. Once we have inserted the chart, we should now reposition it to cell E3 and N25. Once we do this, we now want to add a border to our chart. So go to Format, make sure chart area is selected, select Format Selection, go to Border, select the color as black, set the width to 0.5, and then go ahead and click on the X button. You should see now that it has been applied. Lastly, we now want to go to our Design tab, Pivot Chart Analyze tab, and remove field buttons. So go to the field buttons and press Hide All. Lastly, we want to change our series average into a black text 1 and thickness of 3. So go ahead and go to Design, Format tab, click on Series Average Build, Format Selection, click the paint bucket, change the color to black, and change the width to 3. Go ahead and press X, and we just see now that we have a black line with a thickness of 3. For our last steps, we want to insert a slicer to change our options of our insurance provider. So now we want to click on our pivot table. We want to click on Pivot Table Analyze. We want to go ahead and go to our Filter tab, Filter quadrant. Click on Insert Slicer. It should pop up with this pop-up saying Insert Slicers. We want to select our insurance providers and go ahead and press OK. We should now have a slicer for our insurance. Go ahead and position this in cell B12 and C20. Okay. Finally, next step we want to do is that we want to format our slicer. So go ahead and click on your slicer, go to the Slicer tab, click on Slicer Styles, and select light blue slicer dark 5, which will be this one right here. Finally, go ahead and select your comp dent filter. We should now see that our pivot chart has changed. Once your sheet looks like mine, we are ready to save and upload. Go ahead and save your file. Go ahead and submit for grading. If you are unsure that this is your correct Excel workbook, go ahead and click this hyperlink and check your downloaded file. I'm pretty confident that this is the correct file, so I'm going to click yes. Okay, if you follow my guide step by step, you should be able to get 100%. If you have any questions or concerns, please send your Excel workbook with screenshots to your professor and your TA so they can help you accordingly. Okay, that is it for today. I hope you guys have a great day. Thank you.